So every semester we do one of these workshops, info sessions to go over what exactly a 6050 project is. It's actually called a master's report. MCOM 6050 is the course prefix and number. It's commonly called 6050s around the building. So if you hear anyone talking about master's report or 6050, it's the same thing. So we'll talk about what these things are, what they're not, talk about some of the requirements, basic requirements for a project, and then a little bit about finding a faculty supervisor as well as process. What you're going to deliver at the end of all this and how you get there. To kick it off, the 6050 Master's Report is a capstone project. It is supposed to be your opportunity as a student in the program to take everything that you've learned from coursework and other experiences, take all that, put it together, and kind of show us what you've taken away from the program. At the most basic, it is an applied research project. Okay, and I'm going to stress, underscore, bold, and highlight the word applied. This is not a thesis project. Okay, this is not intended to be what some people have called a thesis light. It is every bit as rigorous as a thesis project. It is simply a research project with a very different focus from a thesis. A thesis, you might be testing theory and trying to expand knowledge about a particular theoretical area. That is not what we're doing here. We are finding a very specific communication-based problem or opportunity, okay? And this could be for an actual client or a hypothetical client. And then we are going to conduct a research project wherein we gather data and analyze data to try to address said communication problem or opportunity for whatever organization, okay? So, but again, to stress, this is very pragmatic. It is not a thesis project. It is not intended to be a thesis project. So some examples of what these projects are, I can give you a couple just from the students I'm working with right now. I have one student who is interested in working with, or she has been working with the United States Marine Corps over the year, and she has proposed a project where she is looking at how to improve communication between Marines on base stationed around the world, communication between those Marines and the people in the communities in which they're based, because there's been a history of Marines getting into, let's call it problematic situations abroad when they go out into the community. In fact, the Marines just were asked to leave Okinawa because of some activities that happened there. So that was kind of the impetus for her project. And so she has actually reached out to and secured permission from the United States Marine Corps to interview people that are involved in the training of Marines in terms of how they train them to communicate with the public, and to see if she can figure out a way to take that information and then pair it with what she's learned from her coursework in terms of communication theory and practice, and put those things together to come up with recommendations that are research-based recommendations that she can provide to her client, quote unquote, which in this case would be the United States Marine Corps and the people that are involved in training Marines that go abroad. And so that's one example. Another example is the other student I'm working with. She is interested in sport communication, and she is specifically interested in studying how fans are covered in the media, and very specifically, again, this is what makes it a very applied project, very specifically how Texas Tech fans, male and female, are covered in the media, and she can take this information that she gleans from the project and then provide it to, ideally the communication staff at Tech Athletics. All right, so she's been doing a content analysis of media coverage of Texas Tech sports, mentions of fans, male and female, or just generically in coverage of regional and national media, so that she can look at that content and then she'll be able to come back at the end and say, okay, When the focus is on female fans, these are the things they tend to focus on, the words they use, the tone of the articles. When it focuses on male fans, this is what the tone is. If it's a male reporter versus a female reporter, this is what the focus is or what the outcome is. And so she can take, that's very practical information that she can take and make some very research-based recommendations to Tech Athletics on maybe how they structure their media outreach or how they deal with fan coverage. You know, if there's a, you know, heavens knows there'd never be something bad, a bad story about Texas Tech fans, like, you know, throwing tortillas or something like that on the field. So this would give them something to use that is pulled from an actual research project that they then could potentially implement. And so these are very practical projects. These are projects that are tailored to these students and their interest, and that ideally they, instead of sending off to be published in some academic journal no one will ever read, they'll take these these projects and be able to use them as like part of a portfolio for seeking further employment, or at least to demonstrate their expertise in these very practical communications-based areas. So those are some examples of what the projects look like and what they entail. In the link, or I'm sorry, in the invite for this presentation, there was a link to the college website, to the graduate web presence. There's a link there that took you to an information page about the 6050 projects, and down towards the bottom of that page there are actually some student examples. Some students gave us permission to post examples of their projects. So if you want to actually see what they look like on the page, there's some examples there, and hopefully we'll record some this semester and post some of the presentations online too, so you can see what the presentations look like. So in terms of the requirements, like what counts as a 6050 project, you have to check off a couple of boxes, all right? First and foremost, it is, again, an applied research project. Now that might take place in the context of an internship you're doing or some portfolio work you're doing or something like that, but at the end of the day, there has to be an applied research component wherein you go out and collect original data, take that data and analyze it, and then translate that into findings and recommendations and conclusions for whoever your client is. You also need to, again, make sure it is a media communications based problem or opportunity, okay? It's really easy to go off the rails on these sometimes and venture off into some area where you're maybe doing something about HR, but it's not really media and communication oriented. And ideally for this degree program, mass communication, or for the online folks, strategic communication oriented. So it needs to check that box. And finally, you have to have a faculty supervisor, okay? You have to secure, and that is actually the student's responsibility. Will help, but you have to secure a faculty supervisor who is authorized to advise one of these projects. That includes anybody that teaches in the MCOM MA program and the Strategic Communication and Innovation program, who is also on our graduate faculty. So basically what that means is, if you look at the list of all the faculty on the website, anyone from the departments of advertising, journalism and creative media industries, and public relations whose title includes the word professor, they're qualified, right? They will be able to chair your or supervise your 6050 project. Now, whether they'll agree to do it or not is a totally different question, but those are people that you could approach to actually do the project. So that moves on to the next thing. How do I approach these people? How do I find these people? If you go to the college website, there under research, the major tabs, research, there is a link to research areas, okay? If you go to that link, you will see laid out several different research areas in the college that our faculty engage in, okay? So like crisis communication is one of them, social media is one of them, political communication is one of them, sports, and so on. If your interests lie in one of those areas, sports, politics, whatever, if you click on that link, it should pull up a list of graduate faculty who focus on that area. So that's a good place to start. So if you're interested in politics, political comm, click on that. It'll take you to a list of faculty that include like Dr. Zhang and Dr. Gottlieb and Dr. McLaughlin and so on. And those are people that you can reach out to be a supervisor for your project. The one thing it might not capture is some of the professors of practice who specialize in those areas. So I'd also suggest that you go and you look at who's been teaching what courses, okay, and go and look at just the general grad faculty listing and look at the faculty in those 3 departments I mentioned: advertising, public relations, journalism, creative media industry. Look at the faculty and look at their bios. Take the time to look at their bios and see what they do, because every single one of them has on their biography, on their profile page, has a list, or have listed their research interest and their background, right? You don't always, though, have to get someone who specializes in a particular area that you're interested in. It could be someone who methodologically is a good match for you. So, for instance, if you're interested in doing a survey in sports, you don't necessarily need to go and bother one of the sports faculty members who are overloaded. You could instead go and find a faculty member who has an expertise in survey, and there are a number of them in the college that they may do surveys across a bunch of different areas, but they still do surveys, and they should be able to advise you on how to put together, field a survey, and then analyze the data from a survey on just about anything in our field, okay, especially in an applied context. So again, on the faculty bios, they do list what their preferred methodologies or where their expertise methodologically lie, and so you can look at that as well to get some guidance. Obviously, people you've had classes with and know that you would work with well, you can look to those people, and then obviously ask around to your colleagues in the program, get some advice from them, and finally, feel free to contact either me or Dr. Callison in the graduate office to ask us for help in terms of steering you towards a person or persons who might be able to help with your project. Okay, I usually can come up with a list of like, hey, talk to these 3 people, go approach them and see what if they are willing to supervise your project. And so I'll end on that part in terms of willing to supervise when it comes to the faculty. The faculty do, in fact, they do need to supervise these. They're expected to supervise these projects, but how many and which specific projects they supervise, that's up to them. So this is unfortunately where if you have a reputation for being a difficult student, it may come back to haunt you if a bunch of faculty don't want to work with you, all right? And then you might come to me and I'll have to bail you out, unfortunately. If you're doing something so niche that no one's ever heard of it or interested in it, you might have some problems finding a faculty supervisor who's willing to supervise that very esoteric project. It could be that you've decided to go approach one of the faculty who everyone wants to work with, and they are bogged down, and they simply, as much as they'd like to help you, and as much as they're interested in your project, they simply are too bogged down with 10 other advisees, and yes, some of them advise that many, 10 other advisees, and they just can't take anymore. And that's, although that might upset you and you might be discouraged, and the faculty member might be discouraged, excuse me, this is actually good for you if they're upfront about this, because what you don't want to do is get tied to a faculty member who simply doesn't have enough bandwidth to allocate to all the students they have, and then you get shortchanged and everybody gets frustrated and it creates problems on down the road. So better to go to the less ideal faculty member who has time and energy and opportunity to chair your presentation or chair your project than to further overload someone who's already overloaded. And so that's kind of it. And again, it's as simple as sending an email or coming by office hours and saying, hi, I'm so-and-so. I either had you in a class, we met at a presentation, or just I'm cold calling you to say, I'm interested in this project. Would you be interested in doing it? And the faculty member will very politely, hopefully, say yes or no, or I'd like to know more, which is something I just told the student the other day, where I said, well, this sounds kind of interesting, just in broad strokes. Can you send me some more specific information? And after looking at that, I was able to say, okay, all right, this sounds good. I'm on board. I'm willing to do this. So again, don't be upset if someone says no. There's usually a really good reason why they're saying no. And for the people that always say no, you probably don't want to work with them anyways. So anyway, so that being said, do reach out to faculty. Don't be shy about it. And don't feel like it has to be, if you're in the online program, don't feel like it has to be the faculty that kind of always teach in the online program. you can reach out to the faculty that are, not usually instructors in that program that are campus-based, and vice versa, right? For the campus students, if there's an instructor who's primarily online, you can surely reach out to them. You don't have to stick to the kind of quote-unquote campus faculty. And that's kind of it, really. And so it's just in terms of that, it's like, hey, okay, I've got my faculty advisor, I've got my topic, now what? Well, you're off and running in your final semester of actually doing the project. And at that point from on, it's very much like an independent study. These should be primarily student-driven. We've trained you at this point. You've got all the knowledge you need, theoretically. You should be off and running and doing this on your own. Now, what that exactly looks like is going to vary from faculty member to faculty member and student to student, all right? Because some faculty members, are very, anal and like me, and have a Blackboard website set up and have weekly progress reports set up and, in constant contact. And some faculty are like very hands-off and are like, cool, that sounds great, go do it, call me if you have problems. And either of those approaches are they're both valid as long as they fit your work style, all right, and you're comfortable with it. So meet with a faculty member, make sure not only topic-wise, area-wise, methodologically they're a good fit, but you might also talk about expectations for how this process is going to work. Is it going to be like, okay, go fly, little bird, or is it going to be, no, I want you to daily give me updates on not only the project, but what you had for breakfast and so on and so forth. So make sure you're cool with whatever work style you get paired with, or at least can tolerate it for a semester. So the main deliverables are that you do a report, okay, and you do a presentation. Your individual advisor may have some other requirements beyond that, like, again, doing a weekly progress report or something like that. But from a program perspective, the things you need to turn in at the end of the semester are a report and a presentation. The research report is about 20 pages or so. If you're using Times Roman, 12-point font, 1-inch margins, all that good stuff. They could be longer depending on how much data you've got, charts and graphs and all these other things that you might add as appendices to the project, transcripts from interviews. But usually they come in around 20-ish pages, if you standard format, report format. The report outline that we have online, and which I can send out to everybody if anybody needs it, it's structured very much like a traditional research paper that you submit to a journal. That's flexible, all right? As long as you kind of hit those things like, I'm giving you some background research, I'm giving you some background lit, talking about some applicable theory, here's the method I followed. You might call and label those differently. The format might be slightly different. Excuse me. Might be slightly different from student to student and project to project, but that's up to you and your advisor. So like, for instance, the student I have that I'm working with who's doing the project with the Marine Corps, we've already decided that her final paper, it's not going to look like something you send off to the Journal of Community Relations and Military whatever. It's going to be something that looks very kind of manual-like, something that you could use in a training session or a train the trainers kind of session if the Marine Corps wanted to actually use this. So you're very flexible in terms of like the final format and structure, as long as it checks the boxes of, I talked about what, clearly identified the problem, talked about the relevant lit, talked about my methodology, here's my data, here's how I ran it, and all that, okay, as long as you have those pieces parts. Then there's the presentation, okay, so the report goes to your instructor or your supervisor. They may want it the day before the presentation, they may want it 2 weeks out to see drafts. I mean, again, that's going to be between you and the advisor. But in the final week leading up to graduation, usually the Monday and Tuesday of that week is when we do the live presentations, okay? So like any other capstone experience at Tech, all right, you're expected to do a public presentation, a live presentation of your project, and whoever wants to come can come. And usually it's your advisor. We do ask that they bring a second grad faculty member to kind of ask as a check on to make sure the process is being followed. And then there may be nobody else, or there may be a room full of people, and it may depend on your project and what you're doing and who you are. Okay, if you're if you've got a lot of friends that want to come watch, I mean, we've had people bring their family, we've had people bring their boss. It's an open public forum. Okay, those presentations are done on campus, okay, or they can be done remotely via Skype, okay, and that might obviously be necessary for the folks in the online strategic comm program, but even for the other students, you know, that are traditional campus-based students, you might be off doing an internship during your final semester in like Seattle or something, and it's just cost prohibitive to come back and do the presentation. That's perfectly all right. We can arrange it where we do the presentation actually in this room using our 360 camera and Skype and all that good stuff. We'll just do it that way. That's perfectly all right. Sometimes the faculty, depending on when you're presenting, the faculty may be joining remotely as well. So we have had some of these where that were completely online and still open to public that wanted to come watch. And so that's kind of it from soup to nuts. All right, it's a big research project that goes over the course of a semester. There's nothing saying that you can't start before the semester starts. If like right now you're scheduled to do yours in the summer and we're heading in the spring and you've already locked down an advisor, you know what your topic's going to be. You want to start collecting data in the spring. That's perfectly fine, all right? You'll just do the credit and the presentation and deliverables and all that stuff in the summer during your final semester as you would be regularly scheduled, okay? If you want to take a project that started as a proposal in another class and develop it out and build on that, that's perfectly fine too. All you got to do is, again, it can't be like double dipping, like you're turning this in for one class and then you're also doing it for your 60/50, or this is something that you're getting paid to do professionally and you're doing it as your 60/50 as well. That starts to get into kind of a gray area. So that's basically it. I can open it up for questions for the standing room only audience in the room, or that's a joke for those. It's like 2 people, 3 people, or I guess if someone wants that's joining us online wants to either email a question to me or use the chat on Skype, I can answer questions that way as well. Don't everybody ask questions at once. And my email is just trent.seltzer@ttu.edu. Bueller. Joe, do you want to ask some hypothetical questions, just stuff that comes up? Jody, Professor Roginson's in the room too, so.
I want to do my 60/50 over for my employer. Do I need their permission?
Yes, okay. If you are, and actually require this, if you are going to work, you're at an internship site, or you're working somewhere, and you're going to do a project, again, that goes beyond the scope of your normal duties, you're going to do a project for a company, you need to get their permission on the front end. We actually have a form that can be filled out by your employer or your internship supervisor saying, yes, I have agreed to let Jody collect data on this topic this semester. And that's not just to give you an extra step to go through, it's to protect you, because we have had in the past where a company has said, yes, I'll let you do this, and then we get into the thick of it and they say, you know what, no, we've changed our mind and we don't want to do that anymore. So this is to kind of cover you and make sure that you can get your data that was promised that you'd have access to collecting. Oh, hey, we have a person. I feel like a DJ. This one comes from Kyle Cobb. Dr. Seltzer, something came up at work. Oh, wait, no, sorry. I'm picking on Kyle. This is unrelated. It is about the thing, but sorry. I lied. Nope, here we go. All right. So a forum question. I'm unsure on what project I want to do, but I have 2 options that vary drastically. Is it okay to go to an advisor and ask for them to work with me even though I'm stuck? Yes. Actually, I would strongly advise that. Even if you're think I know for sure I want to do this topic, I've got it all mapped out, it's going to be perfect. I would still, when you meet with the advisor, talk with them and bounce ideas off of them and be open to them giving you suggestions on how to take it from good to great or from disaster to not a disaster, okay? So,
that's my question. Did you see it in this?
Which one is it? That one? When it comes to professional.
It looks like there's some others in there.
Okay. Yeah, let me address this. So if you're stuck, I wouldn't go with it like completely unformed, like I want to do something in social media, right? That's too vague. But if you're like, hey, I'm interested in how people, influencers on Instagram are influencing people to do X, Y, and Z, but I'm also interested in this that's equally kind of fleshed out, and you take it to someone and you talk through it with them. They can give you some pointers on like, well, this one's more feasible given the time you have. This one's more feasible in terms of access to the data. This one is I'm actually a better fit for in terms of advisor, and so on and so forth. But again, don't get your feelings hurt if you take something to a potential advisor and they're like, yeah, I don't know about that. Have you thought about this other option or taking it in a slightly different direction? I can't think of actually a time I've ever supervised one of these where we haven't had that discussion like, this could be improved or this is more feasible if we make these little adjustments here, there, and elsewhere. So yeah, that's a great question. Yes, you can definitely go to the advisors with that. Just again, don't go like just completely blank, like, I don't know what I want to do. Tell me that. That's going to get a negative reaction. What are some of the other ones that we're being?
So
some people are having some technical issues again. We'll post the video.
did you see that one?
Yeah, so apparently I think Dr. Callison sent out a survey asking about potential advisors. I'll get with him after this to see when we're going to go through all that. I don't know what the closing date on the survey was, so I'll get with him on that and see when we're going to go through that and start making recommendations to people. I would suspect if this is for spring, it'll be sometime pretty soon, so you can get busy over the next month and a half or whatever and get something secured. Again, you can as long as you get someone before like the start of classes, right? I mean, it could be during drop ad even if it comes down to it. I mean, I wouldn't advise that, but if you're still looking for an advisor, like a week or two out, it's not the end of the world. And we do where if there's a couple of people that don't have advisors left, we do like a call for volunteers from the faculty, and after that, there's okay, we've done volunteers, now we're doing the draft. So so you will get matched with someone when it's all said and done. But yes, I'll get with Dr. Callison about that survey.
The work, the published material, the report is not published like it would be if it was a thesis. So if you're doing something for an employer, you can keep information confidential-ish. Like your advisor will read it, certainly, but that has come up before.
Yeah, it looks like the video froze on the stream, so.
So you got the one right above that, and then there's this one.
Okay, what are some gray areas you mentioned in relation to working for a company and doing the research? So again, I think I kind of alluded to it a second ago. If it's something that is within the scope of your normal duties, I would say that would be not a good idea for a 60/50. It is something above and beyond your normal duties, then I would say, okay, that is okay to do for a 60/50 project. So it takes a little bit of you being honest and upfront about what your normal duties usually include. But again, I personally have a problem with double dipping of like, I'm getting paid to do this anyways, and now I'm just going to say, hey, that's my 60/50 too. No, it needs to be something beyond that. Something where you're making a contribution, a new contribution that you wouldn't normally have made in that position, whether it's a paid position or whether it's an internship.
And just an example of that, like if I were doing a scope of work on a daily basis, but there was like kind of a skunkworks project that never would have been given priority as like a short-term goal of the company. But I mean, like say e-learning is maybe doing a tutoring thing.
Again,
they don't have it right now.
If that's not something you normally do in your day-to-day, I would say then that's okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
And again, we probably need to look more at that specific instance, but on the surface, on the face of it, it seems okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I put this in the chat just so that other people could see it too. But if anybody has that same question, but like I'm deciding whether I should
Oh,
do a
okay.
thesis or a 60/50, and if we just talk
No.
about like the professional.
Yeah, this comes up a lot, right?
Yeah.
So we routinely have students that are just, I mean, beyond just the final project, just in general, like whether they should be thesis track or professional track in general, because they have some interest in maybe down the road going and getting a dissertation, or sorry, getting a doctorate and doing a dissertation and being an instructor somewhere or a researcher, something like that. And does doing a 60/50 like put you out of the running for getting into a PhD program? The answer is no, it does not. Even if it is an applied project, there's a couple different things that go into this one. Let me try to untangle how I want to address it. So in reviewing applicants to PhD programs nowadays, it is much more likely that you're going to come across people who went through professional programs and not just people who went through thesis programs, because those professional programs are incredibly popular and the pool of people who actually do theses are probably not as big as it used to be. So if me personally, if I'm reviewing potential PhD students and someone has done a 60/50 type project, a professional project, that would not, in my mind, immediately discount that person from being in a doctoral program, as long as it's well written, it's well conceived, it's the theory is sound, the application of the theory in this instance is sound, the methodology is sound, was executed right, the analysis was right. So that would not immediately rule that person out. Now, I can't speak for every faculty member on the planet. There may be some old fuddy-duddies who are like, no, it's not a thesis, and like put the big reject stamp on you. But I think those people are becoming fewer in number. Either they're changing their minds or they're just dying, I guess. I don't know. Not to make this morbid, but I will. But I think it's just because it is becoming incredibly common to have people coming out of programs with professional masters in lieu of a thesis. And again, the proof's kind of in the pudding here. I mean, some of our top placements have been students that went to University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. That person did a 60/50 project and was in the professional program. Another person went to the University of Oklahoma. That person did a 60/50 and was in the professional program. Another person went to the University of Texas Arlington. That person did a 60/50 and was in the professional program. So as long as you do good work and you're a good applicant, I don't think just because you have done a more applied research project versus a theoretical oriented research project as your capstone, that's going to rule you out from ever being able to get into a doctoral program. If doctoral programs go that route, they will not have any students eventually, because it's just going to be, I think, rare, in my opinion, that people will come out of these programs having done a traditional thesis. Okay. Any other questions on here?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
What are the parts of the presentation? What time?
Oh, yeah, I did not address that. Good. Yes. So the presentations are 20 minutes plus 10 minutes for Q&A. Okay, and again, it's an open forum, so you'll probably get at least a couple of questions from your advisor. Usually the faculty member riding shotgun will have a question or two, and then anybody in the room is also allowed to ask questions. But it's 20 minutes, and it just kind of, again, follows the same kind of structure as your document, right? It's like, here's what I was interested in and what I was focused on. Here's how, some of the background theory maybe that informs how I approached the problem, or not even the theory, the existing research on that area, right? Whether it's, which may also be applied research. Here's the method I used to collect the data, what my findings were, and my big conclusions, right?
And does it include media? Do you do PowerPoint?
Yes, it can. It does not have to, but it can.
You have to have some presentational element.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be PowerPoint, but it can be, handouts.
It could be a website.
Yeah, I
It
mean,
could be a video.
we had someone bring a character once, someone that did a promotional plan for someone that they were trying to promote as being a potential mascot for a football program. They actually had that person come in costume to the presentation. So it can. I'm not saying everybody should do that. Like, don't everybody do that, but you have some options there. But yeah, you typically have some presentational component, visual component, audio component, whatever.
So what faculty members, what your advisor and the observers are most interested in is get to your original data collection and what you think you learned.
Yep.
That's always like
Yeah.
the thing that they want to get you to that really quickly, because
Yeah.
20 minutes is not a long
Yeah.
time.
Don't get bogged down in the background stuff.
Theory,
Yeah.
we'll know you've got that from
Yeah.
the paper.
Yeah.
Right. And do we link our paper to a MCOM theory, or is it all more about the data collection, the research?
You should have in the paper a theory component, because again, this is supposed to be showing that you took the stuff from the program and can apply it. And again, it's not saying I'm going to test this theory or I'm building onto this model or whatever. It is, I am taking the research that's been done in this area and I am applying it to my issue, right? So again, I mentioned the student that's doing the Marine Corps project. There is a ton of research out there in PR journals and elsewhere that deal with community relations issues, okay? And community relations, communication and things of that nature. This student's not testing that theory. She's not trying to validate that theory. She's not trying to add on to that theory or anything like that. She's taking those findings from those studies and applying it to her project. And you can do that in terms of like, here's just the background on this topic that I'm presenting, what we know right now. And that might inform how the project structured kind of like in a big sense or larger sense. Or it could simply be like, I'm going to be measuring people's perceptions of, the relationship they have with the Marine Corps. There is a set of scales that exist in the literature already that I am going to use to do that, right? And so you might cite that lit there. So again, it is not, yes, short answer or long answer, shorter question. Yes, there needs to be some theory involved, but again, keep in mind it's in a very applied kind of context.
And then there was this question just in the tutorial link.
Yeah, I saw that. We'll get the link to the tutorial fixed. I'm not sure what's up with that. Anyone said anything to you about it? No? No?
The page hasn't changed, the tutorial has, but it's on the original page.
Okay. Well, I'll double check that as well.
Send it out again.
Yeah. So again, after this, we'll double check. We'll first of all, we'll get the video finalized and post it. So if you're having trouble hearing or seeing us, you can see that, watch that, and we'll double check the link on the site, and I'll double check the survey with Callison to see if we're ready to start making some suggestions on matches.